What's up guys, Lifting here. This is a video guide for my crit tornado shot build. The build is optimally played as the ranger, but it can be played as both the shadow or the duelist as well if you prefer. The build scales really well into late game and it is able to deal with the highest level maps and bosses including Atziri, and it is fairly cheap to get going. And I should note that the gear you see on this character here in the background is very mediocre, and I want to strongly emphasize that the clear speed, while it already being good, can be much faster with better gear. And the point I'm trying to make here is that the build is budget and beginner friendly, while at the same time it also has the potential, if you obtain good gear, to get amazing DPS and insane clear speed. Anyway, for defenses, this build utilizes the acrobatics keystone together with having a high amount of evasion, life, and by using Arctic armor. And I of course also recommend using a jade flask to increase your evasion rating. The build further utilizes 6 frenzy charges and 4 power charges to significantly increase the damage, attack speed, and the critical strike chance of the character. So let me show you the skill gem setups we use for this character, and let's start with the most interesting ones. The tornado shot setup and the frenzy single target setup. For tornado shot I recommend the following: tornado shot, greater multiple projectiles, faster attacks, physical projectile attack damage, life gain on hit if you have a 5 link, and added fire damage if you obtain a 6 link. And the way this works is that greater multiple projectiles greatly increases the amount of monsters you'll be able to hit. Faster attacks, physical projectile attack damage, and added fire damage all increases the damage of tornado shot directly, and life gain on hit will instantly heal you for a certain amount every time you hit an enemy. Life gain on hit is additionally a great tool for combating reflect damage with this build. For the single target setup I recommend the following: frenzy, faster attacks, physical projectile attack damage, slower projectiles, added fire damage, and lastly critical hit damage. If you don't have a 6 link you can take out critical hit damage, and if you don't have a 5 link you should leave out added fire damage. And frenzy is an excellent single target skill. Every time you successfully hit an enemy you will generate a frenzy charge, which further adds to your damage. And the support gems for this skill all directly increases the damage of frenzy, thus making it a potent single target skill for whenever you need to kill bosses or strong rare monsters. And to effectively spread your curse I recommend the following setup: split arrow, chain, curse on hit, and assassin's mark. Split arrow when leveled shoots multiple projectiles, and together with chain that makes these projectiles chain additional times between each monster, which means you'll be hitting multiple targets at once. This makes this setup perfect for applying your Assassin's Mark curse, and in case you don't know, this curse works by increasing your critical strike chains and your critical strike multiplier, thus making you deal more damage. And together with that it also increases your chance of generating power charges when killing afflicted enemies. Next on, to improve the defenses of the build, I recommend that you self-cast Enduring Cry to obtain endurance charges and then rely on a cast when damage taken Immortal Call setup to proc whenever necessary. For that setup you will need a 4 link consisting of Enduring Cry, cast when damage taken, Immortal Call, and increased duration. I recommend that you level cast when damage taken to about level 9, Immortal Call to a level 11, while increased duration and Enduring Cry can be leveled all the way to max level. This setup will make it so that as long as you have your endurance charges up, then whenever you take a big hit of damage, then the cast when damage taken skill gem is going to proc and cast Immortal Call for you, thus making you immune to any physical damage for a few seconds and giving you time to get into a safer position. The endurance charges will, whenever up, additionally add to your survivability by increasing your physical damage reduction and providing you with life regeneration. And lastly, for your utility setup you need to link the following: Blood Rage, Arctic Armor, Hatred, and Vol Grace. If you prefer a more offensive route you can use Vol Haste instead of Vol Grace. Blood Rage when activated will give you a 25% chance on monster kill to generate a frenzy charge. And besides that it will also grant you life leech for your attacks. This skill is absolutely amazing for this build as it will allow you to constantly have 6 frenzy charges up, which greatly improves the damage of your character. The downside of Blood Rage is that it makes you lose 4% of your maximum life per second as physical damage. However, since we will be picking up some nice life regeneration nodes throughout the skill tree, you'll be able to greatly slow down this degen to the point where it's almost non-existent. And for Arctic Armor, it works so that when it is activated, it will reserve 25% of your total mana pool, but in turn it will grant you increased physical and fire damage reduction. And it will also apply a chill ground effect so that when enemies are following you, they will be slowed down, thus making kiting easier. And the Hatred skill will greatly increase your damage by adding a percentage of cold damage to your attacks based on your physical damage. But it will of course also reserve 50% of your mana when activated. And I should note here that if you prefer a more defensive setup, then using Grace to increase your evasion instead of Hatred is a completely viable choice as well. And lastly, Vault Grace will grant you a temporary large boost to both dodge and spell dodge rating when activated, thus making you indirectly more tanky. And again, as mentioned earlier, if you want to be more offensive, you can use Vol Haste instead, which temporarily grants a boost to your attack, cast and movement speed. And before we continue onwards, let me give you a quick tip when it comes to leveling this character, because it should be noted that leveling up using a bow right from level 1 can be a little slow. It is however definitely doable, and if you insist on doing that, I suggest using Split Arrow linked with added fire, faster attacks and physical projectile damage until you can get your Tornado Shot gem in Act 3. And I also strongly recommend that if you can afford it, then I suggest you buy a Death's Harp bow. This unique bow will carry you all the way from level 32 when you can start using it and into maps. And the bow really isn't that expensive. You can get it from anywhere between a Chaos Orb to 5 Chaos Orbs depending on the role and the player you're trading with. However, if you prefer a faster way of leveling up, then you can instead of course level up using a Flame Totem skill gem together with an Intelligence Amulet and a two-handed weapon together with either Molten Strike or Static Strike. However, this will require some mulling of skill gems, so that's up to you to decide whether you want to or not. And if you're curious about where and how these skill gems can be obtained, then check out the PoE wiki link that I have put in the description. So what you're seeing here, guys, is the full complete skill tree starting at the Ranger. And it is 116 points. As you can see, it's a bit more point heavy than previous 2.1, but still it also has a bit more life, so that's fair enough. Before we begin, I should say that you can also level this as a Shadow. If you want to do that, you need to go in this direction, start here as the Shadow, then branch into the Fizz and Chaos nodes. If you want to level it as a Duelist, you can simply pick it up here by the attack speed, head down here, grab the life, and then head into Art of the Gladiator. But we are leveling it as a Ranger, and I'm going to reset the tree now, and then I'm going to tell you what I feel is the best or the most optimal way of leveling this build. Keep in mind, you can do this exactly however you want it yourself. This is just my suggestion and my recommendation to you guys. And before we begin, keep in mind that the type of skill nodes that benefits this build is the ones that provide life and evasion to make you more tanky. Besides that, you also want some life regeneration to be able to sustain blood rage, and you of course want increased physical damage, bow damage, increased critical strike chance and multiplier, and attack speed to increase the offensive capabilities for your character. So we're gonna start here at the Ranger, and we're gonna pick up some life and evasion by branching in this direction. Then we're gonna pick up Finesse for the attack speed and accuracy rating. I then suggest picking up Primal Spirit for the 20+ to strength and intelligence. This is going to help you level up your skill gems as well, give you some more mana, make it easier to level, etc, etc. From Primal Spirit, I also recommend picking up Heart of the Oak for the 8% increase to maximum life, and also the 1% of life regenerated per second. And this node, as you can see, has been changed. It now also gives you some increased movement speed, so that's nice as well. From Heart of the Oak, I suggest picking up Quickstep for the increased attack speed and movement speed. Branching in this direction, then heading down into Fury Bolts for the 20% increased accuracy rating, 20% increased projectile damage, and the 20+ to strength. Again, this is going to help us level up our skill gems, so not too bad. Then from Fury Bolts, we're going to branch up into Art of the Gladiator for attack speed, accuracy rating, and the nice added benefit of no longer being slowed down by heavy armor. And then of course the dexterity. From Art of the Gladiator, we're going to pick up Bravery for the life and evasion rating. And then finally, Master of the Arena. Now this is optional. You don't have to pick up Master of the Arena, as the only thing it really does for this build is that it grants the 1% of life regenerated per second. But keep in mind that for this build we do use Blood Rage. And Blood Rage will degen your life if you use Master of the Arena together with Heart of the Oak up here, and then eventually Golem's Blood that we'll be picking up later. You will be able to out-regen the degen of Blood Rage. So I really suggest picking it up. It's only 1 point. but it's completely optional. Then from Master of the Arena, we're gonna head back towards the Ranger starting zone, grab these 2 points, head into Herbalism for the increase to life and flask powers, and then pick up Essence Sap down here. Essence Sap is the old Spirit Void, and Essence Sap is very, very important for this build. The primary thing we're looking for here is the 2+2 mana gain for each enemy hit by your attacks. Because we have so many projectiles, we will basically regen a ton of mana back every time we attack. And this alone will allow you to sustain the cost of your attacks. The 0.6 of attack damage leached as mana is nice as well, of course. Then from Essence Sap, I suggest picking up Acrobatics for the 30% chance to dodge attacks, but it also comes with the downside of 50% less armor and energy shield, and then 30% less chance to block spells and attacks. So if you want to pick up Acrobatics at this point in time, then make sure you're primarily only wearing evasion gear, because otherwise your armor gear and your energy shield gear is going to become less efficient. And before you ask, no, I do not suggest picking up Phase Acrobatics for this build, as it is simply not worth the points to get it. From Acrobatics, we're going to travel up in this direction and then eventually picking up Fangs of the Viper, the new renamed notable. It gives you 20% increased physical damage, 20% increased chaos damage, we don't care about that, but it also gives you 5% increased movement speed and some dexterity. It's primarily the physical damage we're interested in here and the movement speed. Then from Fangs of the Viper, I recommend picking up Will of Blades for the 20% increased physical damage and the 20% increased critical strike chance. From Will of the Blades, I suggest picking up Coordination down here for the 12% increased attack speed and then the dexterity. We don't care about the cast speed, obviously. Then from Coordination, pick up some more life by picking up Blood Siphon, and then eventually Trickery for the increased critical strike chance and the 20+ to intelligence. Trickery and Blood Siphon is great for this build, as it not only provides the life but also the critical strike chance, but it also comes with the secondary bonuses of 20+ to intelligence and 20+ to strength, which again helps us level up our skill gems. It cannot be said enough. Now from this point on, we want to grab some more life, we want to grab some more damage, and the best way of going about that is by heading down towards this cluster here, this bow cluster. And we're going to start by picking up Deadly Draw. Deadly Draw here together with the skill notes here is going to grant you a lot of physical damage and increased attack speed. And as you can see, the notable itself is 12, 12, and then 20% increased arrow speed as well. And of course the 12s are physical damage and attack speed, so very nice. From Deadly Draw, I suggest picking up some more life, and we're going to do that by heading in this direction, picking up Blood Drinker here, together with the skill notes that grant 6% increased maximum life, and Blood Drinker will allow you to leech some life as well. So that's a very efficient notable and life cluster. Then from Blood Drinker, I also suggest picking up a bit more life, and we're going to do that by picking up Revenge of the Hunted together with the remaining 2 skill notes here. Revenge of the Hunted is perfect for this build. It grants us physical damage, evasion rating, and life. What more can we ask for? Oh, maybe, well, if it added some crit, I wouldn't complain, but you know. To get more damage from here, we're going to head down towards Deadly Draw again, but instead this time we're going to pick up these skill notes and then Heavy Draw. Each of these skill notes give 15% increased physical damage with bows, fairly efficient, and then finally Heavy Draw that gives you 24% increased physical damage with bows, 10% reduced enemy stun threshold with bows. We don't care too much about that, and neither do we care too much about the 20% increased stun duration with bows on enemies, not for this build at least. Then to gain some more life and also to finally be able to sustain blood rage, we're going to head down towards the duelist part of the tree here. We're going to branch in and select Golem's Blood and the remaining life node here. Golem's Blood will give you a nice 10% increased maximum life, but even more important, a 1.6% of life regenerated per second. That is a very efficient life regeneration node. And this together with Master of the Arena and Art of the Oak, which I also showed you earlier, will now allow you to sustain your Blood Rage skill gem, so you can now start generating those Frenzy Charges. That also means that if you want to, you can start picking up the extra Frenzy Charge notables such as Savagery. We have Fervor up here, and then Frenetic. I suggest saving those for later, and that's what I'm gonna do in this video, or show you in this video, but if you want to, then you can start doing this. It is completely optional. But instead I'm going to recommend picking up some more regular damage, and we're going to do that by picking up Ballistic Mastery here for the increased projectile speed and projectile damage, then Aspect of the Eagle for the increased physical damage with bows and the increased accuracy rating, and of course the 10 flat maximum life is decent, and the 4% increased movement speed is always nice. Now at this point in time with the build, it is time to start picking up crits. And we're going to do that by picking up the most efficient crit nodes to begin with. We're going to do that by picking up King of the Hill down here, King of the Hill will grant you 80% increased critical strike chance with bows and the unique property of knocking back enemies if you get a critical strike chance with a bow. And of course, together with the 2 skill nodes here that grants 10 increased physical damage with bows and 10% increased critical strike chance with bows, you're receiving 100% increased critical strike chance with bows in just this cluster, so it's pretty sweet. Then from King of the Hill, I suggest picking up Lethality over here for the increase to physical damage, the increase to critical strike chains, and the increased critical strike multiplier with bows. And don't forget to pick up these 2 skill nodes here that also grants critical strike chains and critical strike multiplier. From here, I suggest we head up towards the shadow part of the tree, and we're gonna pick up Assassination. Assassination will grant you 30% increased multiplier damage and 30% increased critical strike chains. If you want to, you can pick up this critical node here, and then finally the Cold-Hearted Calculation skill node as well. This is not part of the full build that I'm presenting to you guys here. This is optional. If you want these 2 nodes, that's completely fine, but it's not part of the full build. It's up to you. From Assassination, we're also going to pick up the new notable called Aspect of the Links, and to get here, we're going to branch in this direction for the critical strike and attack speed skill nodes here, and then finally into Aspect of the Links that grants us increased physical damage, movement speed, critical strike chains, and dexterity and intelligence. So very nice and very efficient for this type. After Aspect of the Links, we should grab some more life, and we're going to do that by picking up Thick Skin down here for the 10% increased maximum life and the 8% chains to avoid elemental status ailments, and don't forget to pick up the 4% increased skill node here as well. Then for the 2 final clusters that is going to grant us crit, we're going to pick up Heartseeker up here together with the critical strike chains node here. This will grant us multiplier. And then finally Depth Perception up here. That is going to grant us accuracy and critical strike chains. And now the only thing that's left to do with this build is to pick up the Frenzy Charges and the Jewel Sockets. And I recommend you start by picking up Fervor down here. And the reason this one has to be the first one is because it has a unique skill node here that grants us 4% increased evasion rating per Frenzy Charge. Then after picking up Fervor, go back and pick up Frenetic, head down towards the Duelist tree and pick up Savagery. And then from here we simply need the Jewel Socket, so I suggest you pick up the Jewel Socket here, nearby the Duelist, and then the Jewel Socket up here by the Ranger. This will leave you at 116 points, the full and complete build. If you wanted to take this build into level 100, if you want to spend more points, I suggest either spending them on Avatar of the Hunt up here, or simply spending them on getting the attack speed and more life down here by the Duelist. And now the last thing we're going to talk about is what kind of affixes and stats you should aim for on your gear for your character to make it as powerful as possible. And I should of course mention that being elemental resistance capped is required and absolutely mandatory for this build when you reach Merciless. But when you are resistance capped, these are the defensive stats in priority you need to focus on getting on your gear. Number 1 is life, and I suggest you try to aim for at least 70 plus on each rare item. Secondly, you want evasion. Thirdly, I recommend getting both strength and intelligence on your gear, as it will help you level up your skill gems, and with strength you also have the additional bonus of getting some extra life. And lastly, I recommend getting some chaos resistance. Chaos resistance isn't too important, so don't spend a lot of currency to try and get that. It should just be considered as a nice bonus, however. So to improve your damage, your offensive stat priority is as following. Number 1 is increased flat and percentage based physical damage rolls on your bow. However, you can also get additional flat physical damage on both rings and amulets. Secondly, you should aim for increased critical strike chains. Thirdly, critical strike multiplier, and both crit chains and crit multiplier can be found on bows but also on amulets. As a fourth priority, I suggest getting increased attack speed, which can be found on your bow but also on rings and gloves. And when it comes to improving the damage of the build, the bow is by far the most important piece of equipment. And for this build you optimally, at least for endgame, need to get a bow that has good rolls of increased physical damage, added physical damage, local crit chains, and either attack speed or critical strike multiplier. Like for instance the bow you see here on this picture. For this build you should also get 2 Seething Divine Life Flasks, 1 Ironskin Granite Flask, a Quicksilver Flask, and either a Ruby, Topaz or Sapphire Flask depending on the content you're farming. I also recommend crafting the suffix of Staunching onto one of the Life Flasks as well. This will make it so that it stops bleed effects when pressed. And while this build can benefit from multiple unique items, I am in this video only going to recommend 2. The first one is Lightning Coil. And this excellent chest armor will make you significantly tankier by providing you with extra evasion, life, and a 30% physical damage reduction taken as lightning damage bonus. The only downside to this unique is that it will give you minus 60% lightning resistance, which means all of your other gear will have to compensate for this to keep your lightning resistance capped. If you can manage that, then this armor is a must-have if you care about your character's health. It is absolutely amazing. The other unique item I'm going to recommend is the pretty awesome Rat's Nest helmet, which is going to provide you with a ton of benefits such as increased critical strike chains, evasion, attack speed, item rarity, and movement speed. And besides that, you get the awesome feature of being 10% smaller, which has no impact on your character's performance, so don't worry about that. All in all, it is a very solid choice for a helmet for this type of character. And for additional unique item recommendations, go to my official Path of Exile forum post for this build. The link is in the description. And now lastly, for the bandit quest rewards, you should help Oak on normal difficulty for the extra HP. On Cruel, you should either pick up the 8% increased attack speed by helping Creighton, or grab the 16% increased physical damage by helping Oak. Either of these choices are about equally good in my opinion, but personally I would go with the attack speed as I like having a fast attack animation, which makes my character feel more mobile and helps with kiting. Anyway, on Merciless I suggest helping Atziri for the +1 to maximum power charges, which is going to increase your critical strike chains. However, if you want, you can instead help Creighton for the +1 to frenzy charges, which is going to overall increase your damage. And that's it guys. Remember, if you have any questions, then the best way to contact me is to join me at my Twitch live stream. The link is below in the description. Otherwise, feel free to ask your questions below in the comments or by going to my forum post on the Path of Exile forums. I will do my best to answer any question that haven't already been answered in this video. Now remember to subscribe for more Path of Exile content. Thank you for watching, and bros, do you even nerd?